It's Monday morning. It's Mr. Keith and the Max with you on Mirador Television. And sorry, yes,
Good morning. Yes.
I allow him to get a word in now and again. As if I can stop him. And we welcome you to the White Hart Hotel, from where we broadcast. As usual, I came in this morning and Sally was there with a big, broad grin on her face, wonderful smile. She provided me with coffee, which got my whatever's going. And we're ready to face the day. And we'll look at the headlines in a moment. But first, let me just say that I reiterate, and talking to people over the weekend, is there are others that are beginning to think that what a useless bunch we've got in Westminster. They should do nothing but bicker, and no matter what happens, they will choose to fight. Now, normally, this would be between the government and Her Majesty's loyal opposition, except it's His Majesty's now, His Majesty's loyal opposition. But no, not a bit of it. You've got a rump in the Conservatives who are not satisfied with anything that their leaders do. And they are beginning to kick up a fuss about the tax plan that Liz Truss and her cabinet have decided to bring into play. It's a daring and bold plan, and it has met with the same sort of reaction that indeed Margaret Thatcher's liberalisation of tax laws and of the loosening up of open markets did in 81. As a consequence, not only have we got Labour falling over themselves, spitting fire, but also those people who tend to be towards the centre of things in the Conservative Party. Now, their job is to help keep the government on track, but they do it so publicly. Well, then I say publicly, they get into little cabals, which they let be known are operating and are so going on so publicly, that in the end, we really don't know who the hell is voting for what and what confidence we can have in any of the initiatives that are put forward. So that's the scene at the moment in Westminster. And useless? Yes. Oh, they are. They are useless, most of them anyway. But let's give this initiative a chance. But the Metro picks up on the dissidents, and there is Metro, the tax wars. And I've got the Metro in front of me, the whole newspaper, instead of just the front page. And Starmer to reverse cuts in the top tax rate. As Tories say, more on way in the new year. Well, what Liz Truss has said is, look, our tax policy is this. We're cutting all sorts of taxes, which are outlined in last week's budget. And the main one was the scrapping of the top tax rate. In other words, people at the top of the scale are taxed less. And that brought howls of outrage. But however, even economists would disagree on how you actually generate income. Many economists will tell you if you have low taxation, it attracts overseas investment, it attracts business, it helps get business going. And because of that, you make up for any loss and in fact, actually increase the amount of taxation you get in. Those people who believe in heavy taxation to support the state will tell you opposite. So the tax wars are there, with Starmer taking one view. I'm going to reverse the cuts in the top tax rate, and Liz Truss and her chancellor saying, don't expect us to do that. We are going to actually cut more taxes, particularly if this proves successful. So I suppose the next 3 months will carry on.
Well, what I don't get is, sure, tax the rich is a phrase people use and it's catchy, but when you tax them, they tend to run away. Like if I was in the top tax bracket at 40% making a decent amount of money, I would want to take my business overseas or have it in an offshore account.
That's exactly what happens.
Or have it in Dubai. So these tax the rich phrases, whilst they're catchy, they're not actually useful.
No. The only argument is if you're going to provide things like a good health service and good pensions and so on and so forth from the state, where do you get the money from? And what you do is you gamble. What Liz Truss is gambling, and nobody likes a gamble, but nonetheless, I mean, she's got the guts to do it. I'm beginning to warm to her more and more. The more I hear her start to thump the desk. But what she's saying is, let's gamble on the fact that if we have low tax, we will attract this investment and we will keep people here.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that her gamble should be worthwhile. But let's see what some of the other papers are saying. The Guardian. Starmer, I will reinstate the 45p tax to back public services. You see, the exact opposite in philosophy is we've got to back public services. We can't make any cuts. We've got to pour money in. I mean, one of the things I would say about public services is the more money you pour into them doesn't necessarily mean that you get better services. I mean, I give you the NHS, for instance. Where they're always pleading poverty. Okay, cut the nurses and the doctors and the support staff out, and then go to the bureaucrats. And they're the first people to want to have a raise in salary.
And you know, it'll never be enough.
No,
it will never be enough.
Exactly.
So it's almost like the NHS are like the boy who cried wolf, in a way. They cried so much, oh, we need more money. They are the biggest funded organization in the entire country. We need more money. And when they do actually need more money, no one's going to believe them.
No, and also is if they are, if you're going to have public services, you can't. I mean, the argument is that you've got to pay top people the same as the private sector is getting. So, you know, if the head of the electricity company is getting £1 million a year, then what you've got to do is pay £1 million to those people in public services. I don't think that necessarily follows. What we really want is people who will want to support public services and therefore go in as executives.
Maybe. I'm not sure, but this Guardian headline, Starmer, I will reinstate the 45p tax to back public services. 45p really doesn't seem like a lot, but in the grand scheme of things, what does that mean, 45p tax to be reinstated?
Well, at the moment, the highest level of tax is 45 pence. You and I, for instance, because we're
45 pence to the pound.
Yes.
What?
So
that is a hell of a lot of money.
It is. That's almost half. That's almost half.
So the highest tax bracket will be 45%.
Yes, or 45p to the pound.
That is robbery.
It is high. It is high. However, as I recall, in the 70s, the 1970s, at the height of the last crisis, is the tax bracket was something like 60 or 70p in the pound for high earners. That's why a lot of people fled abroad. And
I would, jeez.
Yeah, so that's why the trust strategy is to bring those people back or to keep them at home. You know, there is some economic sense to that before we all start to yell. What really upset me, as it did a lot of other people, is to take the cap of bankers' bonuses. I firmly believe that the banking system has to be totally reformed. It is not helping anybody. It doesn't help our overseas investment because it takes on risky stuff and then asks us to bail it out. And it doesn't help the retail sector because actually it puts on punitive interest rates up to, on some credit cards, up to 32 or 33%. And that is iniquitous. That is Shylock. They made £8 billion. That was Lloyd's last year. £8 billion profit.
Well, do you remember the company Amiga Loans?
Yes.
They were charging something like 200%.
Yes, they were, and they were shut down, weren't they?
They were shut down.
Yeah, I mean their argument was we're only lending it for a week.
Yes. Who needs money for a?
Well, there's another one called payday loans, I think.
Payday loans, that was extortionate as well. Yeah, but I think
you get paid on a Friday, borrow on a Thursday, and pay 1,000% or something. Yeah, it's ridiculous. Right, let's go on to the next paper. The I, Tory jitters as Kwarteng pledges extra new tax cuts. Now, I think the story here is about those people in the Tory party, not Labour, but the Tory party, who are worried about the government's bold new policy. If it goes wrong, we are in the poo. But the fact is, if we'd have carried on the way we were, it would have taken us a long time with a faltering economy, faltering services, faltering absolutely everything. So I'm all for the gamble. But the thing is that those people who are backbenchers are worried about their seats next time round. Now, I suppose, in fairness, if I was an MP and I got a marginal seat, I would want the boss to be making moves that are popular with my voters to make sure I get my job back, get my seat back. But by the same token, is if you go into politics, it is a gamble. If you put yourself up for election, you put it up on the basis of this is what you're going to deliver, not on the basis of I think that what we'll do is give the boss a bad time. That to me is negative thinking, and it doesn't help.
Yeah. Moving on to the next one.
We can indeed. The Mirror. Oh, Neville blasts Tory madness. Tax cuts for rich are immoral. Now, this is where I get quite upset. Footballers are very good at playing football. Film stars are very good at making movies. They all want to get into politics.
Yeah,
I don't know why they do. They do. And they make statements and so on and so forth, which are eye-catching because they are who they are, and they haven't thought it through, and they're not capable of thinking it through. So I don't know. I don't know this man, Phil Neville. I know him as a good footballer, and I think that he's done some commentaries, if I'm not mistaken, or been in management, something of the sort. But he is not ever, as far as I know, been involved heavily in politics, and yet suddenly he's making a protestation, and the Mirror is putting him on the front page.
Yeah, and what annoys me, is, especially with the actors, is they get so political, the actors do, and then they bring it into the movies, and then they wonder why their movies do terribly when they bring politics into it.
Yes, absolutely.
It's ridiculous. Oh my God, why are our ratings down? It's like, because you're going on about politics. People don't want to talk about politics all the time. They want to unwind and watch a TV show. But why are people putting politics into things? Same with the football games. Everyone was taking a knee. Everyone's doing political things as footballers, as rich people. They're like the top 0.1% of earners, and they're lecturing the public.
Yes. Well, the other thing is that, I think we have to be very careful. Yes, as a nation that believes in we're a fairly liberal nation, and we are very, very have minimal laws and an attitude towards minorities. But some countries do not have. And for us to go and tell them that they should is, to me, that's immoral.
Like the footballers
exactly.
wearing their stupid little patches.
The patch to try and tell Qatar that they should change their ways.
If you really want to affect it, don't play there.
Exactly. And if you're a foreign labourer and you're being abused, you don't have to stay. Surely if they want and need foreign labour, they would stop abusing them to get them there. I find that this pressure stuff is all a bunch of muddled thinking. But there we are. Okay, what have we got next? The Daily Mail. Quasi's boost for families. What he's saying, what the paper is saying is carry on cutting taxes. And he says that the Chancellor has vowed to defy the critics and carry that policy on. Now, the Mirror quite often can get very harsh, and it quite often stands in the centre and aims fire at both sides, both Conservatives and Labour. But on this one, it has come down heavily on the side of the government. So that's an interesting stance.
Well, the Daily Mail is definitely one of the most conservative newspapers we have, if not or of the mainstream ones at least.
Telegraph tends to be a bit more conservative, but
yeah.
The Times. Pay pain for workers as the public sector squeeze. The Times has actually started to take rather an unusual viewpoint in its headlines and its editorials. But if the public sector is squeezed, and indeed I think that the government has warned workers in public sector, the public sector pay will not go up by substantial amounts. But having said that, I do not know of anybody in the public sector proper who suffers because of their salary. Now, I tend to talk to people who work for Lewis District Council, and they, for a long time, have been saying, some of them have been saying, look, I only make this amount, whereas the chief executive makes, I think it was recorded the last time I looked, at about $250,000. Which ain't bad
for a councillor.
Yeah, for a chief executive of the council. He's not an elected official. Okay. He's the executive. He's the man that supposedly makes it work. Except there's some question about that as well. But some workers do say that they are quite lowly paid. Now, what lowly paid is, I don't know. Is it 20,000? Is it 25,000? Is it 30,000? 35,000? I haven't been able to access the pay scale for the local council. All I do know is, and for the for the county council, which does have far more responsibility, a much greater area, a bigger budget, and more things to worry about, is the chief executive there does nudge close to $500,000. And all these are without bonuses and perks and so on and so forth, because all these people have a car that ferries them from here to there, and or that they drive from here to there. They have generous pensions and so on and so forth. So I'm not too sympathetic to the pay pain for workers in the public sector, because there are many in the private sector. You shocked me the other day when you told me that there are people being paid £4.50 to serve pizza, was it?
Yeah, the lowest minimum wage is £4.40.
£4.40, and there are people flogging their guts out for pizza companies and so on. Is that right? Yeah. Well, let me tell you this: if you want to tell the difference between somebody who is overseas, not English, as a waiter, and somebody who is...
To be clear, that is the minimum wage for a 16-year-old. It then goes up to £6 for a 17-year-old. I think £8 for an 8. No.
It goes up to 10 somewhere, doesn't it? But you seem to think it was 21 or 22.
Minimum wage isn't even 10. It's lower than 10. I think it's for adult minimum wage starts when you are 23 years old, which is ridiculous. And adult minimum wage, I think, is £9.50 an hour. Let me look up the exact statistics because
okay. In the meantime, I will go on with the theme that there are many people who are making much less than those people who are in the public sector, and so to cry foul. I feel that I can be quite virginal about this simply because I'm an entrepreneur. I only get paid when I earn it. If I don't, I don't, and it's that simple. So living on a bumpy edge quite often is not new to me. If you're actually earning X amount and you expect it to be increased, next year or this year or whatever, then I suppose there is disappointment. But disappointment is different to reality, and what sometimes are expected as an increase isn't at all real.
All right, so I have the all the minimum wages. So for under 18-year-olds, so this is the wage that my brother is on. He's a pot washer at a local pub. Under 18, it is £4.81 an hour.
Jesus.
And then 18 to 20 is £6.83, which is nothing for a 20-year-old. 21 to 22 is £9.18, and people over 23 minimum wage is £9.50.
Right, so you're right. It's not even 10.
No, not even 10 anywhere.
Right. But I mean, £4 something is. We're supposed to be encouraging our youth. That doesn't sound like much encouragement to me.
No, I know so many people, like just 1 year younger than me, who are like, I'm not going to get a job. What's the point?
Yeah.
Doing all that work for £4.81 an hour. I'm not doing that.
Tell you what, we've actually been beating our gums for how long? Well, we've been in for 21 minutes. Let's go to the park for a quick refresher, shall we? Okay. There we go. Right, here we are. A lovely trip down to the park. Now, just interrupting the international news for a moment, but one of the things that I noticed when I was just scanning through local news is that somebody has pointed out that around the tulip tree in the park that we've just been to, our Potter's Wheel, the Southover Grange Park, is there are some stones. And they sort of look as if they're just broken and lying higgledy-piggledy in the around the tulip tree. The tulip tree was saved from being axed a few years ago because the council decided that it was threatening with its branches, likely to fall on somebody. But that was a few proper cuts of the branches and a few props, and it's still there. But apparently, the stones are a memorial to when I think it was in the early 1950s, as a Princess Elizabeth, the Queen came to Southover and planted a tree or planted a plant, and then that was put there to as a memorial. Now, it does seem bittersweet that we should have said goodbye to the Queen in such pomp and splendor, and that our own memorial of her visit here to Southover Park is lying in rack and ruin. So there is no reason why. I think that the article said that they'd asked about the tree people and the parks people, who had said, well, of course the thing is trees grow and the roots come up and they break these things, but there's no reason why it can't. I mean, it's in bits and pieces. According to the photograph that we saw, there's no reason why those bits and pieces couldn't be put together in a proper memorial again. That's a poor excuse.
I could go down there and look myself at some point.
Yes, I think you should. It'd be a good idea. I think that we might make that one of our little crusades, shall we? And keep an eye on it, and we'll actually ask the council what their position is. Now, okay, so. I'm it's just a little bit. We're just checking the picture here because I came in early this morning. We abandoned our radio broadcast for the first hour just so that we could see if there was another little bit that we could do to bring a half decent picture. It's still not great, but it's not bad, is it?
No, well, no, it's better than average. It's better than usual.
But we're not using our new little
gadget thing
yet. Yeah. So hopefully maybe it's sometimes the obvious is the way forward.
I mean, I've heard lots of very good reviews about that little gadget, but we just need to get it up and running. It's having some issues. I don't know.
Yeah, well, we'll keep at it. We'll
Yes.
keep at it. It's like anything new. You always sort of start to use it and you think, oh, it doesn't do what it says it does. But then you find out that you push another button or you...
Got to get it into the break-in period.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Okie dokie. Now, let's go on from the Times then. Right, the Daily Express, traditionally a government supporter. Truss pledges to build world-beating economy. Now, that's the way that the government sees things, is that they are going to rejuvenate our economy and get it going so that what she is pledging to do is to build a world-beating economy. Now,
It's a very bold statement.
It is a bold statement, but it also is, of course, whether you loved her or hated her, depending on your viewpoint, is Margaret Thatcher did turn Britain in the 1980s into a world-beating economy. And we actually worked our way, I think, into number 3 in the G8 economies. We were vying with France. The first one being the United States, of course, and the second one being Japan. And then we came, France came fourth, a third, and we came fourth. But we then decided to, is it all right?
It's gone fuzzy again. Sorry about the quality.
All right, it's gone foggy again, has it?
Yeah. Well, here's the thing about Margaret Thatcher. I hear a lot of good things about her. Obviously, she was before my time. I wasn't even born when she was in power. But around here, where I live, and in Lewis, I hear a lot of good things about her. People say, oh, Margaret Thatcher was a very good Prime Minister. But everyone in my family who is from the North has only negative things to say about her. They absolutely despise her because she shut down all the mines.
Yes.
But it is strange because a lot of my family, I have family from the North, and they're all like, no, Margaret Thatcher is terrible. She did an awful job. But everyone down here is like, oh, Margaret Thatcher was great. She did a brilliant job.
Well, the world, the country is divided about her. There's no question. Basically, whether they like it or not, and there are still people that argue that the mines should have been kept open, is that they were losing money.
Were they?
Yes. Yes, I mean, it's like our ships. You see, with coal, it was easy for governments to keep them open by subsidizing them. The shipbuilding industry went belly up because it was competing with the rest of the world. And what it could do is it could turn out ships much cheaper than we could. So we virtually have no shipbuilding industry left. There are one or two little bits and pieces here in their pockets. But I don't know whether anybody noticed, but just about a year ago now, I tend to say last week, but about a year ago, the last of the great British shipyards, Harland and Wolff, closed their doors in Belfast.
Really?
Yes. Do you know what Harland and Wolff are famous for?
What?
Building the Titanic.
I was going to say that, yeah.
And it's because I lived in Belfast for the guts of 15 years during the Troubles. And the skyline with the 2 huge cranes were quite normal for me passing them. They were at the heart of a lot of the dissent between Catholic and Protestant, because it was said, and there was a large element of truth to it, I think, is that if you wanted a job at Harland and Wolff, you needed to be a prod. And if you were a Catholic, you didn't stand much chance. But the prods had to go through Catholic areas to get to the shipyard, and they had to have military escorts or police escorts to make sure that they got through safely. So it was a whole mess in many ways around Harland and Wolff, but nonetheless, they were renowned as shipbuilders, and they only ended their career, if you like, a year ago. So that's interesting.
Right.
All right. Right.
One thing you said about the coal mines losing money. Of course, they're going to be losing money. We just cannot compete with China.
No, or with a lot of other countries that were,
Yeah.
there were a lot of European countries that, there's small countries, and you're right about China. I mean, this is one of the things that people get very stirred up, is that much of their manufacturing is done on the basis that the workers get a bowl of rice.
They use a lot of slave labor of children, so like your computer and my phone will be made by Chinese kids. Footballs, all of them made by Chinese kids. They also use a lot of slave labor from the Uyghur Muslims. Have you heard about this?
Yes, I know about the pogrom, as it were, in the north of the country, is it not?
Yeah, in Xinjiang.
Yeah. I also know that we have to be very, very careful in not making a blanket condemnation. I mean, I go along broadly with you, but I've worked abroad in areas where we've had foreign aid and so on and so forth, and the reports going back have been awful, when in fact the reality on the ground isn't anywhere near as bad as it appears.
Well, I'm happy to blanket condemn China. I'm happy to do that. If you're not, that's fine. But I will say China bad. Full stop.
Yes. Well, it's easy if you haven't got Chinese friends, which I happen to have. Yeah. It's the same as, actually, strangely enough, is happy birthday, Sophie Shevardnadze. Sophie Shevardnadze was the face of Russia Today for a while, a very beautiful lady, and actually a very liberal lady. And her family came from, she was the granddaughter of Eduard Shevardnadze, who was one of the great reformers in the 1990s and got trampled by the oligarchs. For me to turn around to Sophie and say, "Oh, you awful Russians," is very, very difficult. In fact, I wouldn't do it because I know her views. Having said that, I'm willing to take up a cudgel with another friend, and she remains a friend, Margarita Simonian, who is the executive editor of Russia Today, and it recently became a mouthpiece for the Kremlin. I would love to say to Margarita quietly over a cup of tea, Margarita, how much pressure is on you to do that as the head of Russia Today? It's always a difficult situation. What we're getting is filtered or tainted information, either from people who have got pressure on them, or people who or information which is altered by the powers that be. You never know, and not only their powers that be, but our powers that be. One of the interesting things, Max, is that it is said that history is always written by the victor. Now, the one thing that strikes very close to home with me is that Lewis was occupied by the French. There is a reasonably good historic evidence for that fact, and that there was a battle between the French invaders and some bowmen, British bowmen, down at the Priory. And a couple of years or so ago, the council were accused of allowing one of the walls under which this battle was fought to go to rack and ruin, to fall down. But you cannot find in English history books much, if anything, about the English losing to the French and allowing Lewis to be sacked, Lewis to be taken over by French invaders. It all comes from the French, and there is a lot about it in French history books and French records. So you just have to be a little bit careful about where you get your information from sometimes. Okay, let's. This is the Financial Times. Kiev allies warn the Kremlin over Putin's nuclear attack threats. This is getting back to something which is, strangely enough, when I talk to people, in fact, even I talk to you about the possibility of a nuclear attack, is you all poo-poo it. No, it'll never happen. I think that's one of the things that is we can actually fall asleep at the switch, and we have done in the past, by being assured by dictators and authoritarian regimes, we're not going to do anything to you. You're very nice. You're Brits. We love you. And which Hitler claimed that he just loved Britain, and as a matter of fact, so did Stalin. And it didn't put us in much good will when it actually came down to war. So all I would say is I take the warnings from Putin and his mob rather more seriously than most. Having said that, excuse me.
Bless you.
Yes, I need.
Bless you.
I need blessing this morning. Reading some of the other material that's coming out is there is some suggestions that first of all, the public are getting very restless in Moscow, and they do have rather more of a say than we give credit to in sort of seeing it as an authoritarian regime. But the other thing is that some of his allies, some of his allies in the cabinet, some of his allies in government are also getting very uneasy about what's happening, and particularly since there is no question now, in my mind, that the Ukrainians have actually kicked the Russian army into in the backside, and that it is retreating, and that those people who are coming back are giving horrific stories about it. And now that he's tried to conscript, I think it was 200 to 300,000 people for the army, is that a lot of them are actually trying to find a way to get out of Russia so they don't have to go and serve. So it's a bit of a mess.
Well, here's the thing. I don't believe anyone really thinks nuclear war is going to happen. I really don't. Because if you really thought nuclear war was going to be happening, you would obviously be preparing. You'd be prepping.
What would I do? What would I be doing as a preparation?
Stock up on a lot of food, learn how to do medical training, do all these sorts of things that can help you better survive a war, or even worse, a nuclear war. It's just not going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen in your lifetime, and I really don't think it's going to happen in my lifetime either.
Maybe, maybe not. All I'm saying is that I think that don't take this man lightly. And well, there are a lot of experts who have studied him over the years say the same thing. Once he's cornered, he really gets, he actually becomes irrational and does irrational things. Sorry.
What was I going to say? I was going to say something and I've just forgotten now.
You were preaching to me that I should start to get ready for nuclear attack.
I said you should prepare for nuclear war if you really think it's going to happen. I'm not preparing for nuclear war because I don't believe it's going to happen.
Yeah.
But there was an opinion piece in the New York Times saying, and this was a ridiculous, outrageous article in the New York Times, it said a small nuclear war could reverse climate change.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
so that made me a bit suspicious.
Yes. It's a small a few people are hoping for it. Now, I wonder if recently, within the last couple of months, Raymond Briggs died. Raymond Briggs, you would know as being the author of The Snowman. No, you've never seen The Snowman on television? Or?
No.
Oh, it's a classic story, a children's story. Anyway, that's why he's basically known, is for The Snowman. But he did a number of other illustrated books, and one is called something like Where the Wind Blows, or How the Wind Blows, and it is about an elderly couple who actually hunker down for a nuclear attack on the basis that the advice was what you do is you stock up with food and you stay hunkered down until everything gets better. And his thesis is this couple eventually die because things never do get better. So it's worth a read. When I say a read, it's an illustrated book, See if you can find it on your little magic machine there. Raymond Briggs, I think it's Where the Wind Blows or When the Wind Blows. And it's quite frightening in some ways.
Okay. I'll have a look at that later, yeah.
All right. Okay, IMF bailouts reach a record 140 billion as crises push poor countries to the brink. So it's not only just us that are having a problem. What comes after the Financial Times?
Yeah, that's the last one.
Is that it? Oh no. The Daily Telegraph. The US will take catastrophic action if Putin uses nuclear weapons. Right. Okay. I mean, Biden, I think, is saying that if you push the button, Mr. Putin, we will most certainly push the button, and we actually outrank you in terms of firepower when it comes to a nuclear arsenal. I found it quite interesting when I worked in Ukraine, and where you would drive around and you would come around a corner and you would see a MiG jet set in concrete with its nose pointing to the sky. And that signified that it was an armaments factory, but it was an armaments factory before Glasnost. In other words, now it was making knives and forks or whatever. I mean, it was making domestic stuff. But the MiG outside signified that it was a weapons factory. And the gentleman that I was with is a pretty knowledgeable guy, and he said, if it had come to war with Russia, the chances are that we would have won, because everything that the Russians make is big and heavy. Their whole philosophy is building big, heavy things. And actually, I have seen a MiG jet being restored down in Washington, what's the next county over?
I'm not sure what the next county
is.
Well,
I think actually it might be in West Sussex, Washington. But anyway, they are big, heavy metal things.
What? West Sussex, Washington.
There is a town called Washington in West Sussex. Nice little town, little village actually.
Oh, really?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought.
Yeah, I've been there. Whether it was the reason that Washington was named, I have no idea. I think actually Washington was named after George Washington, was it not? But perhaps he was named after this village. It's a lovely little village, but it actually had there a little aerodrome with crop dusters, and the gentleman in charge is a lovely man, and he reconstructed old aircraft, and he'd got a MiG in there that he was reconstructing, and believe me, they were not lightweight planes. But anyway, we've got. That's taken us away from what we were talking about. Who would win, who would lose? All right, the Daily Telegraph that the US will take catastrophic action if Putin uses nuclear weapons. He is making sure that they know where the United States stands on this issue. What's the last one we got? Is that the Star, a wonderful Star? Your name's not on the list. You can come in. What's that all about? Oh, I know. Yes, what it says is the row about Holly Willoughby and Philip. What's his other name?
Schofield.
Yes, Philip Schofield jumping the queue at Westminster Abbey is that they said, well, media could jump the queue. They could get in and not have to wait for hours. Yeah. And so what the Star is saying is, well, that may be, but that her name and his were not on the list. Now, I don't know whether it's a manufactured photograph or not, but they have the couple looking at a list with a gentleman searching for their names on it. And
I don't think the Daily Star would lie about anything. Well,
but then again, you can place a photograph without saying much and make it speak volumes, and those volumes may be incorrect. But anyway, what they're saying is that their names were not on the list as accredited members of the media to get in, and I can well believe that, because they are, like us at the moment, they're presenters. They present a morning program. They're doing it now.
I thought
not anywhere near as well as we do, but they're doing it right now.
Well, I was under the impression that they were there to go film for a piece for Good Morning Britain.
Maybe, in which case the editor was at fault for not submitting their names.
Which, in a way, is not a very good defense. Oh no, we weren't skipping the queue because we wanted to be there. We were only doing it because we had to be there. It's a little bit of a worse. It seems a bit like not a good excuse.
No, you and I wouldn't have made that excuse. We decided not to go so we wouldn't pack the press bunches. I'm not terribly sympathetic to them. I do understand that there can be a problem because in the past I've found that my name isn't on a list after I've been assured that all the forms have been submitted. Bureaucracy can be a dreadful thing. So you turn up at something and you say, "Hello, this is me," and they go through this saying, "I can't see you on that list," and it's heart stopping. And sometimes you can argue your way in, and sometimes you can't. I know on one occasion I actually covered what's known as the Grey Cup in Canada, which is like their cup final for Canadian football. It's coast to coast, and I had to do some reporting for a station in Calgary, and my name wasn't on the list after being promised, so I had to sit in a nearby hotel and do the reports for the television coverage, which is not very satisfactory, but nonetheless, it can happen, and you think, "Oh, bugger." All right, that's the lot, I think, isn't it, of the papers this morning? And basically, what we've got is a battle royal in Parliament. We've got the Conservatives taking what is, in my view, a very conservative view. Is let's go for broke and let's open up the economy. Let's try to boost the economy through low taxation. With Starmer, who's saying, no, what we'll do is we will actually save a lot of that money, or we'll keep on collecting it in taxes to support public services. That battle royal is going on. But then internally in the Conservative Party, there are those people who think this might just be unpopular, or it might go wrong. And what we can expect then is to lose our seats, which are marginal. So they are umming and ahhing and iffing. How many of them in that rump are there? I don't know. But certainly they are among those who got rid of Boris and now are trying to create some problems for Liz Truss. I wish that they would all stop. No, the fight between the Conservative government and the Labour opposition is a fair and just one. You cannot have good government if you've got a weak opposition. And if this gives the Labour Party the impetus to be very robust in their opposition, then it's doing some good on the other side as well. If it isn't, then it's a pity.
Okay, can I just say, this is my first time getting the Metro newspaper, okay?
Yeah.
I would say I've just looked through the whole newspaper, right?
Yeah.
I would say probably 80% of it has adverts.
Which wouldn't surprise me.
I'm not going to get this again, actually.
It is a freebie.
It's free, yeah, but genuinely about 80% of it is adverts.
Yeah.
I will not be picking this up again.
It doesn't surprise me, I must say. It doesn't surprise me one little bit. Right, okay, Mr. Director, where are we going from here?
We will go to Scenes in Sussex for 2 minutes, and then we'll be back. Well, we'll go to Scenes in Sussex briefly.
All right. Right. Now, Mr. Director here has looking for a piece to show you that it's got longevity. Tell you what, let's tweak somebody's tail. Show the energy bit. I love showing that, particularly right now.
Well done, the energy companies. They're full of bright ideas to help their customers. Now they've made power so expensive that for an average house such as this, you can't afford to heat it. So you don't need appliances such as this. But that means you also don't need a fridge, because you can keep your groceries cool and fresh without it. The house is cold enough. Well done, chaps.
Let's do a little bit on this.
Sorry, we're back.
Some good stuff here.
Wasn't it?
Oh, here we are. Oh, we're back again. Some good stuff
track.
here. Yeah. Well, I just love that piece where we tweak the tail of the energy companies because let's face it, they have a lot to answer for in the current problems that we are having with their prices. Now, I just opened up a page, an inside page from the Mail, and it's interesting. Just that there are a few stories here. First of all, it looks as if Italy is going to elect its first woman prime minister, and she is right wing. In fact, they say that she is the furthest right of any candidate since the Second World War, or prior to the Second World War. It'll be interesting to see how that turns out, because Italy, by nature, tends to be a rather socialist country. It has very, very strict laws about redundancy and being laid off and so on and so forth, which are very much in the favor of the worker. So if in fact voters are lurching to the right, it'll be interesting to see if they do and why they do.
Well, maybe she'll change some of that in Italy.
It could be. It could be. I mean, perhaps once again, it's very difficult to say. It's a bit like us, putting the patch on to go to Qatar. It's easy to say what another society should do, and particularly when the people who are members of that society do exactly the opposite of what you think they should.
So they're saying,
sorry.
So they're saying the furthest right, the farthest right prime minister since the Second World War. When was the last time we actually had like a far right government?
Well, Margaret Thatcher's was a far right government.
I don't really far right.
Yeah, by our standards, it was not at all liberal. But you know, if in fact what you're doing is you're talking about imposing limited thinking and imposing limited activity and so on by the government, it didn't have any of that, because actually what Margaret Thatcher was a true conservative.
Yeah.
She believed in laissez-faire. Laissez-faire means to leave us all alone, to get on with ourselves. So as little government interference as
more
possible.
Libertarian.
Yes.
Yeah. I
but
really
also,
don't think that's
she believed in private enterprise and open markets, and that's why so much privatization took place in the 1980s.
Again, I'm not quite sure if that's far right. I think that's just more traditional conservative.
Well, this is how we really tab our politics nowadays: far left, right, far right.
Well, you said an interesting thing a second ago, actually. You said far right as in censoring speech and limiting what you can say. Well, there is a certain party that wants to do that. I mean, that's already becoming... You are getting limits on speech now.
Yes, we are, to some extent. And as a matter of fact, one of the other stories here is MPs demand action over free speech champions who are cancelled by PayPal.
Yes, I was worried about this as well.
Do you know the details of that story?
Yes, I do.
All right.
So people are having... PayPal is a very far-left company, and anyone who they politically disagree with, they are banning from using their services, which is very Chinese social credit system. The Chinese social credit system is you go against the government and go against the norm. We're going to take your bank account away, so you can't provide. This is what PayPal's doing now. We don't like your politics, therefore you're not allowed to use our services.
Financial services,
Yeah,
right.
Which is very concerning.
Oh,
I
yes,
am
indeed, it
personally
is.
concerned about
Yeah.
that myself.
Actually, it is interesting, though, in terms, isn't it? Because from my time in British Columbia, actually way before my time, from about 1953 to 1972, the governing party was Social Credit, and Social Credit was another name for Conservatives.
Social credit, obviously, the definition has changed, but yeah, the social credit system is difficult to describe in a few words. It's how good you are as a person according to the government.
Oh, right.
In terms of
They
the
rate
Chinese,
you.
terms of the Chinese system, yeah.
Right. And if you're a good person, what benefits do you get?
If you have a higher social credit score, then you're more likely to be promoted.
Oh, right.
Whereas if you have a lower social credit score, you're most likely to be demoted, or if it's low enough, have your bank account taken away. And China doesn't allow cash anymore. So your bank account is your only option to receive and use money. So once they take away your bank account, you can't then pay rent, you can't provide for your family, you can't buy food, then you starve to death, all for going against what the government says. Which is what me and Liza go on about a lot, because it's scary, and I do see it happening in this country within my lifetime.
Yes. Well, I don't see it happening any more than you see nuclear war. So how's that? Now, here's one that is a bit frightening: is that the Metropolitan Police have, without saying anything, cut their speed limit tolerance by 1 mile per hour, and that the speeding ticket numbers have surged by 259% as a result.
Speeding tickets are a way of making money.
Absolutely.
And I thought it just was 10%. So if you're going 33 miles an hour, if you're going in a 33 in a 30 zone, then you're okay. Because some older cars have speed limits that are a little bit off.
Right.
And not as accurate as they should be. So there is a tolerance. And why they've changed that, I don't know.
Right.
So what is it, 8% now? Or
Yes, something
know.
like that. Between January and June, 347,000 drivers were told they faced prosecution for speeding, compared with 97,000 in the 6 months before the change. And nobody bothered to tell anybody. One other thing, which some fans of television, all television programs actually go out of fashion. I actually love tuning into something like Talking Pictures, because they occasionally show a series. They're showing one at the moment with Tony Curtis and Simon Templar, who is that Roger Moore, called The Persuaders or something of the sort. And I remember at the time it was a very, very popular TV show. Now I watch it because the only place that you'll find it is on something like Talking Pictures, which shows old movies. But now it will appear that nobody who was worth their salt, except me, watched Strictly Come Dancing on a Saturday night. But now the ratings have started to fall. They are... it was the smallest audience in 8 years on Saturday night. Now, still watched by an average of 6.84 million viewers, which is quite a few, but it is 1 million fewer than the number for the equivalent program last year. So whether in fact fashion is changing, or whether in fact because of the decent summer and the late entry into sort of autumn, and people's habits have changed a little bit, I don't know. but Strictly Come Dancing is, if you're a fan and you weren't watching and you wanted to continue, you'd better tune in this Saturday, by golly, or it's in trouble. Everything is subject to the ratings on the big boy. With us, we are constant. You can expect us here, whether we've got our usual 6 million watching in the morning or whether we've just got 2 or someone in between.
How much does it say the ratings have gone by?
It's gone by 1 million on the last year.
Gone down by 1 million.
Yeah.
Well, traditional TV really is going downhill.
Yes, it is.
I haven't watched TV. I haven't chosen to watch TV by myself in probably something like 5 years.
Yeah.
The only time I watch TV is when I'm at my grandparents' house.
Well, I actually watch it in the evenings, and of course, nobody would be surprised if I say that BBC One and ITV One are really, because their licenses depend upon them being all things to all people, and so they've got to have a wide variety of programs. But after that, most stations are. I mean, you can even get one that'll sell you diamond rings for 24 hours a day. I mean, it's quite incredible.
Yeah, but those diamonds are a little bit questionable.
Well, I don't know whether they're dodgy or not. All I'm saying is there is a television channel dedicated to selling diamonds. There are some, as I just said, talking pictures dedicated to old movies. There are some that are dedicated to drama. I mean, one that's quite interesting is that it has a whole bunch of stuff about the Nazis. The buildings that defied Hitler. The weak points of Hitler's regime, and so on and so forth. So you can actually watch quite specialist stuff as much as you can a general program. So there. Right. Okay. Now, do you want to take us? Where would you like to take us, Mr. Director? What is coming up? Ratty and the Races?
I think we should play that one, yeah.
Ratty and the Races. And we should play that.
Give a brief overview of what Ratty and the Races
Yes,
was?
indeed. It is an episode in our acclaimed series. I always want to say award-winning series, but we didn't get any Oscars for it or anything. But it was watched by 2.5 million people, which isn't bad for a tiny little television station like ours.
That is pretty impressive,
about 2018, 2019, something like that. And it has been. People still refer to it. People stop me in the street and say to me, you are the television man, aren't you?
Yeah, you know what? I had that in a taxi a couple of weeks ago. I was talking to the taxi driver, and he was saying, "Oh, what do you do?" I was like, "Oh, I'm working for Mirador." And Keith Haynes, he did the bloody history of it, the bloody past of a tiny town. And he's like, "Oh my goodness, I watched all of that." Yeah.
Yeah. Well, actually, a lot of people did, and a lot of people don't know that it exists. So, putting it up and showing and re-showing it now is there are a lot of people that say to me that, "Well, gosh." In fact, this one I think is all about the race course, and a lot of people, of course, go back to the mid 1960s when this was a racing town. It had something like 65 racing stables within the town and within the environs of Lewis. On race days, you had all sorts of people come into town, and there was a very healthy, so Liza tells me, a very healthy boarding house sector because these guys came in and they just during the races. But it goes back to the Prince Regent, who in the late 1800s would go up to the Lewis racecourse, and they said that if the Prince Regent was attending the races, that it increased the crowds by up to 10,000 people who wanted to go up to the racecourse just to gaze at him and whoever his lady happened to be at any given time. And there is a lovely story about him driving down Keir Street in Lewis, Keir Street being a very steep and cobbled street. And if he'd have crashed it, he'd have broken his neck, and history would have changed because he wouldn't have become George IV. But it is said that he was egged on to that by a baron who lived on Lewes High Street. And Lewes High Street is, still quite ancient. And some of those houses, in fact, most of those houses are still there. But that he was egged on to do this. And that in so doing, he actually was urged by this baron, who bet Lord Cholmondeley, I think it was. He bet Lord Cholmondeley that, and he was short of stature, was our favourite baron, and he bet Lord Cholmondeley that he could carry him piggyback around Old Stein in Brighton, and they came to the day, and he turned up. And the baron said to Lord Cholmondeley, take your clothes off. And he said, what do you mean? He said, well, I said I would carry you piggyback around Oldstein, and not you and your clothes. So take your clothes off. His lordship declined, and the baron won the bet. So that's the sort of thing they got up to just at the end of the high street here in the late 1800s. And they were all great horse people. In fact, this particular baron was married to a lady who was a very accomplished coach driver, and who had actually been the former mistress of a highwayman. So there you are. It's pretty spicy, you know. The stuff that's gone on just up the road here is pretty spicy. Okay, that's this is about our race course here, which was started. Some people say as early as 1702 under Queen Anne. Others say that the records go back to the 1730s, but it was there for a long time, and much of it is still in evidence up there. So you can see what we have to say about it in this
one thing
chapter.
Before we start, I was surprised to find out this weekend. Do you know how many female monarchs we've had?
3. How many?
8.
Really?
Yeah.
Not sole monarchs, surely.
Yeah, I believe so. I'll recheck. It said 6.
Are they counting Boadicea?
6 female monarchs in the United Kingdom, and 2 contentious ones that were one was only monarch for a day, and another was monarch for a week. So of actual long-serving female monarchs, not long-serving.
Well, I think the one for a day was one of Henry VIII's wives.
Yes.
Yeah, whose head he had cut off. She was a subject of his passion, of his lust. And then when he... good morning. If you want to come on telly, we're here.
Wondered whether we could get breakfast.
Yes, you can. If you actually go through and ask at reception, and
Okay.
they have breakfast at the back.
Thank you.
There we go. Helpful as usual on this television station.
Shall we go to the ratty race?
Yes, we'll go to the ratty races.
All right. Here we go.
He sat on the bank while the river still chattered onto him, a babbling procession of the best stories in the world. That was the excitement that Mole experienced in the story Wind in the Willows. And indeed, rivers large and small everywhere all have many stories to tell. The River Ouse that flows through Lewes is no different. In fact, for much of the town's history, it has played an important part. Today, the river carries nothing but pleasure craft. But for a long time, it was a busy, bustling port. About a mile upstream from here is the village of Hamsey. It sits on a triangle of land which splits the river as it curves down towards the town. Hamsey is barely a village today. A few houses with the 13th century church standing in splendid isolation. But Hamsey was a Saxon port in the pre-Norman era. Historians estimate
that over 1,000 people lived here, populating a port that saw ships sail up the Ouse to trade goods. There is no doubt that the Normans had a bit to do with its demise. The area was handed over to a Norman lord. But the community was attacked by an enemy it couldn't stop. An army of rats, which disembarked from one of the visiting ships, went ashore and infected the village with bubonic plague. The Black Death. The disease devastated Hamsey. And while there is no historic evidence, legend has it that the residents barricaded themselves in to prevent unaffected people coming in and diseased people getting out. Eventually, they starved to death. Named after the black rats which carried the plague, the Black Death killed over half the population in Britain between 1348 and 1349. The survivors founded another village off Ham, the modern thriving village of Opham. The plague attacked Lewes several times over the following centuries, each time causing significant loss of life. So death continued to stalk Lewes, bringing tragedy to the high street in rather greater measure than other UK high streets. Ramsey gone, but Lewes as a port flourished. Ships and barges plied their trade up and down the Ouse, creating an exciting and bustling waterway. Many of these buildings, which stand on an extension of the high street in an area called Cliff, are built with old ships' timbers. Where Argos now stands was a sailor's pub called the Bear, built as a brewery in 1787, and it succumbed to the carelessness of revelry and burned down in 1918. This quiet domestic street, which runs for a short distance parallel to the Ouse, was the sailors' playground, and history relates that there were more than a dozen brothels successfully operating. Today, this street is known as Little Chelsea. Even the name makes it seem a nice place to live. The rather small abodes have found favour with many modern Louisians and are now favoured homes. And why not? They look good in a twee kind of way. And if you're not living in a former brothel, there are other historical backgrounds to raise the interest. All this talk of pubs and trading around town, it saps my energy. So I sometimes come to this little oasis. The Notts Garden in Southover Park. A lovely little hideaway. That's the High Street, or at least its extension into the cliff area of Lewes. So I've been wandering around here because Lewes is full of antique stores and models. As I mentioned, go inside some of these shops and you'll find that they're supported by old ship's timbers. Another reminder of the days when Lewes was a port. All this talk of water has made me thirsty.
I made several mentions of the time Lewes had 63 pubs. As you would expect, among the 16 that are left, there are some with strong ties to the community. Over the road from the shops, held up by ship's timbers, is the Gardener's Arms. There seems a tradition in Lewes, although no one admits to it, of omitting the epithet pub or tavern. This pub is called by locals simply the Gardeners. And the Gardeners it was. The origins of this pub go back to when it was an ordinary house, owned by a gardener. Often, after work, he would invite other gardeners into his front room for a drink. Eventually, it made sense to formalize the ritual, so it turned into a pub. The Gardeners is a true pub. Unusual now, it only serves pork pies and sausage rolls. Yet each year it's in the top tier of finalists for Pub of the Year. Magnificent. Back to the Street of 1,000 Brothels. Well, perhaps not 1,000, but a few anyway. There's a pub called the Snowdrop. Nice pub, they tell me. Interesting for its name and where it stands. This is the site of England's deadliest avalanche. Just after Christmas in 1836, heavy snow built up on the edge of the downs. There were 7 cottages here where the pub now stands. Despite warnings, the people living there went about their business, totally unconcerned about the snow. Then, whoosh, down it came, demolishing 7 cottages and taking the lives of 8 people.
Time, gentlemen, please.
Not heard now, but the admonishment of past landlords that it was time to quit drinking should have been heeded by the cottagers. A disaster both for the country and the town. A brief mention of one last hostelry, the John Harvey Tavern. Named after the founder of a local brewery, the one of 16 to survive to the modern day, Harvey's has been around since at least 1790. And an important inhabitant. Along with Mole and Ratty on the banks of the River Ouse. More on that later. For the moment, back to the bar. How I wish I'd lived in Lewes when it had 63 pubs. Bliss. You might think, from the pubs I've been into, that Lewes is a drinking town. The town constable in the late 1800s didn't think so. The town constable in 1890 didn't want it to be. Here are some notes from the High Constable of Lewes, a gentleman called John Holman, dated 1880. Sunday, the 10th of October, visited all the public houses during morning service. All in good order, except Lewes Arms, several there tippling in service time. Sunday, the 17th of October, visited public houses, all in very good order, except the Lewes Arms. Again, a second time, several persons in both parlour and taproom tippling at 11:30, time of divine service. Gave the landlord a caution. Sunday, the 14th of November, visited public houses as usual, witnessed very great indecency in the person of George W. Several persons were tippling during divine service, and on our approach to do our duty, they were permitted to hide themselves upstairs in the pub. This was the 3rd or 4th offence of the same kind. Wow, a bit different today.
But beer is very close to the hearts of this Sussex town because it's one of the main employers and industries. Earlier, I mentioned the John Harvey Tavern. John Harvey started his brewery on the banks of the River Ouse in 1790. He was one of the 16 that flourished here at one time. Now, with just the odd microbrewery popping up here and there, it's the only one. The brewery is close to the hearts of the community. The pubs it owns have in the main remained traditional, while its method of delivery has most definitely remained in the past. Miles Jenner is the chief brewer, and his range of beers reflects the activities of the local community. The dray that trots around town is a symbol of the tradition of the brewery, but also of the town. The beer maker turns out beers named after local events: Firecracker, Tom Paine, Bonfire Boy, and Lewis Castle. The name Harvey, synonymous with Lewis. You've been around, or the brewery has been around for quite a long time. Can you develop a little bit of the history for us?
Yes, the family came down, the Harvey family, from London. They were wine and spirit merchants at the end of the 18th century, and they started brewing in Lewis and on this site in the early 19th century.
I can stand next door to a man in a pub in Lewis, and he will swear that Harvey's tastes quite different to anything else, and he won't drink anything else. I mean, what's the secret of the product?
Any brewer's beer is really a derivative of his water and yeast strain. We never talk of water, we talk only of liquor, but a local water supply and the brewer's yeast strain, it gives his beer individual character. You could take our recipes, exactly the same raw materials, go and brew at another brewery with their water and all their yeast and have a totally different brew at the end of it.
Talking of water, and you mentioned that the barges came up the Ouse. How important was that to the brewery in the past?
Well, I think it was very important. It was, a fundamental form of communication, and if you were bringing a fair few tons of barley upstream, then it was a very sensible way of delivering. But just as industry sent stuff out to the river, so the river sent stuff back to them, and it wasn't unusual to brew with river water around your feet. And the last big flood we had in 2000, we were 6 foot deep in river water. We got our product together very well, we had a good reputation, the brewery was re-equipped, and we were producing a beer which became very much identified with the local community and was dear to their hearts. The fact the building is actually known as Lewis Cathedral tells you something about the way that Harvey's is viewed in Lewis.
The brewery flourished, but Lewis as a port rapidly declined. The familiar barges that had plied the River Ouse in the early 19th century carried loads of clay to the town. But the clay was used to build the beds for railway lines, and the death knell for river traffic sounded. The ships had consigned themselves to history. The first train to run from Lewis was in 1846. Since then, the railway has become an important junction in the national network. Trains from Lewis Station run to Brighton in the west, Hastings in the east, Newhaven Port in the south, and London in the north. There have been successes and failures. Other lines were axed over time, with one, the Bluebell Railway, preserved as a steam preservation project. Back to our tale of the High Street. Cliff High Street is an extension of the High Street ending at the base of the Downs. At the end of it is an ancient church, St. Thomas of Becket. The Black Death wasn't the only medieval disease to strike Lewis. Leprosy was rife. This infectious and unsightly blight is first recorded in Lewis in soldiers who took part in the Battle of Lewis. It seems that the monks of the priory tended leprous people in 2 hospitals. Of the larger hospital, St. Nicholas, little remains, but the smaller hospital of St. James also treated lepers. Bones of the hundreds who died in the Battle of Lewis showed that leprosy was widespread.
Don't wear this hat to look pretty, you know. There's a Sherlock gene in me somewhere that gets me into more trouble than enough. So I'm going to stick my head above the parapet and suggest that there's evidence of leprosy here long before the Normans paddled ashore at Hastings.
The church of St. Thomas of Beckoning Cliff, that's the very far end of the High Street, up against the Downs, has a leper's slit. This was a channel built into the church wall, so that lepers could take Holy Communion without infecting the congregation. St. Thomas's is a very ancient church, with bits of it predating the Normans by quite a few years. The interesting thing about this slit is that it starts and ends inside the church itself. Additions were made to the church over the years, so it appears that the leper's slit was built into the original church, but encompassed within it as it was enlarged. Certainly leprosy entered Europe about the 4th century, but was only virulent in the 11th. But it seems that the disease was already in Lewis well before that. Anyway, the Cluniac Priory tended to lepers until a certain king's greed and love life shut the priory down. So leprosy could be added to the Black Death as a scourge of Lewis.
But let's shuck off the historic events of Bloody Lewis and celebrate the river, the way that our friends in Wind in the Willows did, the lovable mole and his friend Gung-Ho Ratty.
Each summer, a raft race is held on the Ouse by the local round table. Teams from organisations, schools, businesses and even groups of individuals construct weird and wonderful rafts and race each other from Lewis down to the sea at Newhaven. Not a very fair race. The crews bombard each other with flour and water bombs, water pistols and any other old rubbish. Spectators add to the mayhem by pelting other missiles at the crews.
The first few hundred meters are quite torrid, because from the bridges here, people hurl flour bombs and eggs and all sorts of things at you, really. But when you get past Lewis, it's quite peaceful and serene down the river, and you've got the tide to help you along as well. Last year the theme was the Rio Olympics, so again it was quite open to interpretation. You could just take Brazilian culture or, of course, the Olympics. I actually took part last year. I duly sank in Newhaven Harbour, unfortunately. But obviously we put the proper safety provisions in place, and we were fished out before we were swept out into the English Channel. There's been suggestions this year that there will be pirate rafts and people drinking rum and trying to board other people's boats, but we'll see how that happens. We're limited for safety reasons to 25 rafts. In the next number of weeks, we're going to have talks with all the safety bodies, and perhaps we may be allowed more, but obviously safety is our main priority. This year I've been absolutely inundated with applications. I think I've sent out over 100 application forms.
Wow! Now how do you select which of the 25 are going to be lucky?
It's down to, in a lot of cases, the event is sponsored. So in many cases, sponsors may get priority, but overall it's just a lottery, really, and or the best rafts will be chosen.
Now, in fundraising, do people just donate, or what do you do? Do you have people shaking cans?
There's a certain amount of bucket collections, and also there's an entry fee for the raft race itself. A good portion of that money goes to the actual operational costs of providing the safety provisions and so on. But obviously, whatever's left over will go to the local charity.
Right.
This year, we're also in partnership with Newhaven Town Council, because they really wanted to get more involved, because obviously it finishes there. So this year we will be supporting a charity in Lewis and a charity in Newhaven.
A lot of people line the banks Do you take an estimate of how many people are here on a good Sunday?
We would estimate maybe 5,000 to 7,000, but we've no way of telling really. But it seems to be a very popular event, and the people of the town have taken it to their hearts.
Yes, indeed they have. I mean, it's a wonderful occasion. After all the bloodshed and death in this little town, that regatta makes me feel a lot better. Time for a little nap, I think. I misled you. I told Porky Pies. It wasn't about the racecourse at all. You got the wrong episode. But anyway, it's an interesting one because we covered topics from the Black Death through to the making of beer. 63 pubs and 17 breweries. Oh, bliss, oh, bliss, oh, bliss. If only I'd been here in 1815. And there are only 9,000 citizens. So work that out how many pubs there were per capita to go around.
How many pubs?
63. 63 pubs, 17 breweries, a population of 9,000. And before people say, well, of course you're counting the children in that, is the children drank beer as well, because the water was not fit to drink, killed people. So everybody drank beer. Oh, bliss.
That's about 47 people per pub.
There you go. It's 10:03, and it's the 26th of September in the year 2022. It's going to reach a high of just 16 today, which is chilly. And
well, it's not chilly. It's chilly compared to what we've been used
absolutely
to this summer.
Yeah. Well, it is. When you stand at the bus stop, it is a bit cool. But anyway, we are going to have some scattered periods of sunshine and a moderate breeze. So that's what you can expect outside. Not a bad idea, though, to take an umbrella or a Mac with you, just to keep the rain away. Just bringing you up to date with the news is that the pound sinking to a record low against the dollar, and the UK economy is predicted to flatline next year. And it means that the Prime Minister and the Chancellor are defending their mini budget. They're in panic amid rumours Bank of England may have to intervene on the plunging pound. And one analyst thinks it could happen this week.
How would the banks? How would they intervene?
They pump money into the economy, I would imagine. Yeah. Patrols have stepped up around the mosques in Manchester after city centre disturbances again. With that, I think isn't it Sikhs?
Yeah, the Sikhs versus the what was it?
Muslims.
Yeah, the Sikhs versus the Muslims. There was a lot of, I don't know if you saw the videos, but there was a lot of fighting going on recently over the weekend. So there's been increased security.
Yes.
Funny how they don't mention who was attacking the mosques. Weird.
Yes, do they not?
Well, no, they didn't know.
No. Right. The cost of charging an electric car has surged by 42%, with the prices nearing the same as petrol. So, so much for that.
Well, I have an issue with people who say they're being environmentally friendly by buying an electric car.
Yes,
because they're not environmentally friendly. You've just done no research and think you're a good person because you bought a Toyota Prius.
Right, just on the politics still. Winning the battle of ideas, the Shadow Chancellor says she is most optimistic about Labour's future in the 12 and a half years she's been an MP. And senior Tories have told the Prime Minister and the Chancellor to take stock as the pound continues to slide. Labour is setting out its economic plan at a Liverpool conference today or later this week. So there we are. That's bringing you up to date on the British economy. Right, sir, Mr. Director, where are we off to now?
Well, I did look through behind the headlines. There isn't a whole lot, but the Daily Mail here says Meghan is trying to be the UK's Beyonce.
Oh, what does that mean?
Do you not know who
Beyonce is a singer, isn't she?
Yeah.
Yeah.
A pop star, influential figure.
So Meghan is trying to be a pop star?
No, she's trying to be an influential figure.
Oh, is Beyonce an influential figure?
Yes.
In what way?
she's massively famous, and people will follow whatever she says.
In other words, what we said earlier is, if only she should stick to singing instead of saying, of telling people to follow whatever her philosophy is. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, the two of them deserve one another. I'm sorry, Beyonce. I know the name, but if you played me a record without saying your name, I wouldn't know you from anybody else.
No,
I'm sure your singing is very beautiful, but it'd be much better to. Everybody's phoning this morning. How often it is? Okay, we're not going to be interrupted. We are not being unless they come through that door and interrupt us, and then we are delighted to be interrupted. Absolutely delighted to be interrupted. In fact, we will interrupt any program if somebody comes through who is of interest, and there is a standing invitation for any of you in Lewis who happen to be coming down the high street between 8:30 and 11 to stick your nose in, and we'd be only too happy to see you. And it's only 10:08 now, so you've got time. Who knows what might come about. All right, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Tell us more about Meghan's pretensions. What does she want to be like? What does the article say?
Page 6.
Right. Okay. Right.
Hang on a minute. Look at this. It says turn to page 6.
All right. Yeah?
You go to page 6, the British economy. They've told me to go to the wrong page. This is the Tory budget. Okay.
Right.
That's not helpful.
They got it wrong too. Here I thought I was taking you for a day at the races, and now the Mail thought it was taking you to Meghan and Beyonce, and not a bit of it. It's all about the economy.
Okay. Well, it's on page 5.
Now it's on page 5. So if you get the Mail, ignore the first thing on the front page and go to page 5. Meghan expected royalty to bring kudos and fame. Now, what's that all about?
Well, she was already famous beforehand. Well, she wasn't famous. She was a model on The Price is Right. You know that show?
Oh God, yeah, that was the 1960s.
It was. It's still going on today.
Still going on today. Goodness
Price is
gracious
Right
me.
still goes on today.
How on earth do people become famous being on The Price is Right?
She was a model. She was the suitcase model who shows you how much she was the one who would open the suitcases.
Yeah. Can you remember any of the other people on The Price is Right who
I've never watched it.
You've never watched it. There you go. That's the sort of fame she had. Right. Okay. We've established that. Yeah. Okay. Film star. Right.
The worst rated monarch would be pretty easy to guess. Not the worst monarch, sorry. The worst rated royal would be Prince Andrew at somehow 13%. Yeah. I don't know how he's got 13% of the UK's support.
Well, there are some people I think that would argue that he is being tried with the morals of 15 years ago or something. But I think that's part of the argument. Yeah.
Well, he's not, but yeah, I don't think that could be a reason.
Right. Okay.
But she's the second worst rated at a close 23%. So she's only 10% difference from her and Prince Andrew.
Not a very high rating, 23%. I agree. Yeah.
No, again, still, I say this every time, but I've never met anyone who supports Meghan Markle.
Right. Now, what supports the headline there? Meghan expected royalty to bring kudos and fame. Is there anything referring to that in the early part of the article?
Well, yeah, she meets with celebrities. She's here with, is that Chris Rock? Oh, no. Wait. Oh, that's Jay-Z. Interesting.
Who?
A rapper.
Oh, right.
Jay-Z. She met with Beyonce.
All these people who are famous and I've never heard of. Right. Okay. Yeah.
Well,
you're going to say it's age. I know. But it doesn't matter. True fame spreads right across the ages. Huh? That's why we're so well known.
It does a little bit. I don't really want to talk about it, to be honest, because it does annoy me that she's always in the newspapers. Just because it gets the attention, because people don't like her.
I mean, that is part of our objective, is to gain attention. if we don't have people watching us, we're actually, as the Jamaicans would say, beating our gums. Right.
Is that
Okay.
what they said?
Yes.
Okay. There were riots in London, apparently. Violent protests over death of a young woman held in Tehran spreads to Iranian embassy. Oh, yes. There's been massive protests going on in Iran. I don't know if you've seen this.
I was aware that there was some upset. Yeah, but I haven't followed exactly why.
Women's rights protests.
Yes, so some of the younger Iranians are defying people by going in modern clothes and modern haircuts and not wearing any sort of face covering. Is that correct?
Yes, and they're showing their ankles.
Oh, my goodness me.
And
How
some are
titillating.
even driving.
Oh, wow.
Well, did you ever see the clip of the Iranian president in the EU Parliament? The UN Parliament, when he was like, "We are now going to allow women to drive," and he starts clapping, and no one else claps because everyone's just looking at him, going like, "Really? Now this is happened in what 2016?"
Yes.
But women are allowed to drive now in Iran, but they can only drive automatics. They're not allowed to drive manuals.
Oh, right.
I don't know why. Apparently, it damages their ovaries.
Yeah, I mean,
Because they
one of the
have
things
these
I do think that
ridiculous-
we've got to have to watch is Iran and Iraq and some other Middle East countries. I mean, including Saudi, who take the stick, and Qatar for that matter. Is they for centuries they have been Luddites. They haven't changed much, and when a reformer comes along, he's expected by us in the West to make massive changes. Now, can you imagine somebody coming along and making massive changes here? You'd be the first to object, no matter how much his stance may be right. I think, they're making small concessions so that he advances the country, but by the same token doesn't upset particularly the clerics who are capable of creating absolute havoc in these countries. I think that I don't know the ins and outs of it. But I would say that wholesale change in Iran and Iraq is almost impossible. It has to come gradually. I actually trained about 2 years ago now, I think, a lady from Saudi Arabia who pointed out to me that she held a driving license and that she drove and that change was underway. But there were, for instance, she had a scarf which covered her face and she would not take that off. Now, here we got as a modern driver, but she still was very supportive of women having the hijab or the jihab or whatever it's called.
Well, this is going to be very controversial, but I hope Liz Truss brings up in Parliament a burqa ban.
In this country?
Yes.
I actually wouldn't object too much to that.
No, I wouldn't.
I actually worked in Kosovo, which is 98% Muslim, and I never ever saw any Muslim dress in the schools. And in fact, they were rather proud of the fact that the schools stayed religiously neutral.
Really?
Yeah, and
Even at 80, what was it, 98%?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing that really I found upsetting was that there was a mosque right close to my where I stayed, and at 4 o'clock every morning I had to listen to the call to prayer. The only thing is, it was done through a tape recorder. The mosque leader, whatever they call him, the imam or whatever, he stayed in bed and flicked a switch.
What? Did you know there's never been a female imam?
Well, that doesn't surprise me.
No.
Yeah.
No, not even in this country.
Yeah, well, it doesn't surprise me either. I mean, the religion is the religion, isn't it? It's and let's face it, it wasn't too long ago that we didn't have women priests in the Church of England, and there still aren't, as far as I'm aware, in the Roman Catholic Church, is there?
I believe there's.
Are there some in the Roman Catholic Church? I'm not absolutely sure. Yeah,
Definitely not a large percentage.
Yeah,
definitely not a lot, but there are some, I believe. But yeah, I do hope a burqa ban gets brought up. But one thing I do question is people say that the women in these Middle Eastern countries are unhappy. But I don't really know. Are they? Because that's the only way they know. That's the only way of life they know for a lot of these women. They don't have access to the internet. They don't have access to foreign newspapers. This is the only way they know. And what it says in the Bible, or the Muslim Bible, I can't remember what's the Quran, they read the Quran and go, oh, this is what God wants. If God is happy, I am happy. Are these women unhappy? Or is it only the women?
Well, I mean, I think you've got to be
know.
careful by putting all women together, because there have been sort of mini revolutions, have there not? Particularly in Iraq after the fall of the dictator and a liberalization of their way of life. So there were a number of women who were used to the Western ideas. But to be quite honest with you, is if I had my grandma here in front of me now, and I told her of some of the things that we've done, she would be tut 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 tut. Now she wasn't brainwashed, but she was very used to a certain way of life, and asking her to suddenly change it overnight would have been a travesty. It would have really upset her, even though she wasn't necessarily anybody who was backward thinking. I do think that change, I've stamped my feet about reform, but I think the change has to be handled not in a great rush, because that's when it comes unstuck.
Do you think you'll see change in your lifetime, or do you think
I've seen huge changes in my lifetime.
No, with government reforms.
No.
Do you think I'll see them? Probably.
Perhaps, but in talking to the mayor of New Haven on this show, I don't know, 18 months ago now, I suppose, she said she didn't expect to see any political reform in her lifetime. She said, politicians are the last people to want reform, and that falls in line with my thinking. Is if you've got your hand into the till and somebody says, I tell you what, why don't you legislate to cut it off? The last thing you're going to do is to legislate to cut it off.
Yeah. Okay. Well, one thing I really do hate is how the politicians get to vote on their own salaries. I really hate that. Yes. Because in the parliament they go, oh, who votes for a higher salary? And what would 650 MPs put their hand up?
Yes.
Or 100% of the vote goes to
I think part of the problem with reform in government is that actually once you become an MP, your view changes about how important an MP is, and they become ultra important, and therefore they should be looked after better than the rest of us. I
don't think they should be on low salaries.
Well, I don't think that they should be treated any better than the rest of us. What is the difference between you and I going to work at 6 o'clock in the morning and ending at 6 o'clock at night, and sometimes phoning one another in the evenings and so on, and chatting on the weekend, to them doing the same thing?
Well, the problem is if they're not paid like they are now, the argument is they're more susceptible to bribes because they need that extra money. Whereas if they take the bribes.
If they're susceptible to bribes, they should never ever become MPs. And the fact of the matter is, of course, is we had much better governance from Westminster when MPs weren't paid at all. Now, the argument there was, but poor people couldn't become an MP. But they couldn't anyway, because the system didn't allow them.
They still can't.
So the change was...
Sorry? Even to this day,
they're unlikely to, but they can. I mean, anybody can actually be... Well, for instance, there's nothing to stop the local Labour Party adopting as a candidate somebody who's ultra poor. Nothing to stop them at all. They can do it. All you got to do is to have them take out a membership in the Labour Party, which costs a fiver. And actually, if you really want,
it is a fiver a month. It's a little bit more than that.
Not that much more.
No, it's about 35 quid a month for a membership in the Labour or Conservative Party.
Is it 35 quid a month?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
No,
These memberships are extortionate.
My wife was a member, and she paid £5 a year or something. I thought,
£5 a year.
Yeah.
Because I was looking at becoming a member of the Conservative Party so I can vote on issues on the inside. And I was like, 30? What? Are you kidding me? And then I looked at Labour to see if I could join their party to mess up their votes. And it was still like extortionate amount of money.
Well, that's absolutely outrageous in that case.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, right. That's another thing that we can wage war against.
Well, I'll have a look at exactly
what
how
that
much.
is it's being discriminatory and selective. And that's what's wrong with the people that were put up for Parliament. They come through a discriminatory and a selective process. So don't talk to me about bloody democracy and that your wages are reflective of a democratic process, because they're not. They are demonstrative of a selective process which you don't want to change because you're afraid that your salary will go down and your perks will end.
Well, I certainly can't afford to become a member. So they're really only getting the middle class and the upper class.
That's right.
People voting in the inside elections.
Right. What we'll do is we'll start a third party. Those people who are prepared to pay nothing.
Well, third parties don't really ever get anywhere, unfortunately.
No, they don't. I mean, actually, if anything is wrong with our system, that's it. But I mean, the purists go back to Athens and so on, which actually is a falsehood.
Have you ever? Sorry for interrupting, but I've heard about this recently. This idea of politics, and I think it's a very interesting way of being an MP or a councillor. I think what could be an interesting idea potentially is jury duty. So you get jury duty for your local constituents, and as an MP can be jury duty. So you're MP for 6 months in your district, and you get paid, but it's random selection, like jury duty is.
Yeah.
So it's regular people then go to the House of Parliament and vote on issues, and they'll vote on issues that will actually help their community because they're only in there for 6 months. They don't have anything to gain from the long term. And if they purposely mess things up, they'll upset the people in their own community.
Depends whether you trust a jury.
No. Oh, yeah, that's a good point. But still,
Yes.
I think it's an interesting...
remember, juries have professional advocates laying out the case before them, which if you were selected for a parliament on that basis, you wouldn't have.
Right.
And if you did, people would shout foul, and quite rightly so.
Yeah. But yeah. I think that is an interesting... I don't think it will never happen. But I think it's an interesting way.
No. I mean, the idea of everybody should be able to vote was the true Athenian way. The true Athenian way was all citizens. All citizens. If you're a slave, if you're a woman, if you were a foreigner, you could not vote. Only Athenian citizens could vote. And they all gathered on the green and put their hands up. Shall we go to war? Shall we pay money on this for a fleet and so on and so forth? But that only lasted some 15 to 20 years before they realized that it was unworkable. And they went to some sort of a political party system, if you want to call it that. So true democracy is almost impossible.
Yeah,
nice idea, but it's almost impossible.
What do you think about that idea I suggested? Do you think that could work?
No.
No.
Well, first of all, you would have no continuity.
What do you mean?
Well, you've been there for 6 months, and you might start a piece of legislation, which sometimes would take a year, but you wouldn't see it through. Somebody else would come in halfway through with your ideas and so on, and they would have to then pick up the ball and run with it.
6 months was just a random time period I picked, but yeah.
So continuity would be a problem. But the other thing is that you get some very, very odd people on juries. I mean, have you ever sat on a jury?
No, I'm
Oh, I have. In fact, they made me the foreman. It's nothing like telly.
My mum did jury duty at Lewis Crown Court.
Well, that's where I did mine.
A couple years ago.
Yeah.
How long ago did you do?
Mine would have been. I was working for Reuters, so it would be in 1990. Yeah.
Yeah, a while ago then.
Yeah.
Is there an age
it's not
limit?
that long ago. It's only 30 years ago. In fact, not even that. 25 years ago, perhaps.
Well, the 90s was 30 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
you think that's old? You wait until you hit 30. Okay, and now we'll take catastrophic action if the Kremlin uses nuclear weapons. That's that's Joe Biden, is it not?
Yes, it is. But also a sub-headline here from Ben Wallace, the defense secretary of the UK. Military will get a 52 billion boost, says Wallace.
Right.
Which is interesting considering that 52 billion could go somewhere else a little bit more peaceful, don't you think?
Well, it depends. What are they going to spend it on? Does it say?
To the military.
I mean, I do think the defense of the realm is the first priority of any government, and we've been through well, we've seen countries, and we went through our own in the 1930s, yes, the 1930s, because of the First World War. Nobody wanted to see war again. And we'd fought what was said to be the war of all wars, and there would never be another world war. And lo and behold, 20 years later, there was a world war, and we were totally unprepared. That's why we were kicked out of France. So I have some reservations about cutting back too much. The other thing is that whether we like it or not is you let off a rocket and you've got to replace it, and you're probably talking about a few million there. Difficult to say. Right. What else have we got inside the papers? Or are we going to something else?
I was just having a look. We might go to Like Lewis, because I just need to read.
Yes. Okay. This is we live in a very nice little town.
Yes.
And this was done sort of before lockdown, actually, but it showed what a nice little town it was. It is still recovering to get back onto its feet, but if it can regain the charm and loveliness of just 3 or 4 years ago, so much the better. And this is how we saw it at the time. Well, that's our little town, and not a bad little town at all, at all, at all. Badly governed, but then that's another issue. It's got us in it. One of the things that is on the back pages of the Mail this morning is Southgate. My job's in jeopardy. You know how quick we are. He was a great hero when we came second in the World Cup. And then he's lost 7 in a row. Is it his fault? He's playing the same game. He's managing in the same sensible way, scientific way. The players just aren't good enough at the moment. But he'll walk away. And it says that the FA are worried that he will walk away after Qatar, whatever happens. And that's because all the people that are, I got a hero today, and he's not my hero tomorrow. They go like the wind, and all they can ever be is critical. You never hear anything constructive from them at all. It's always no, 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 no. And yet we listen to them, and we're swayed by them. Why don't they go away and support Tiddlywinks? That would be a good sport for them. Tiddlywinks. Would you like to be the manager of England for Tiddlywinks?
I have no idea what that word means.
You don't know what Tiddlywinks are?
I've never heard of it.
Good heavens. Well, actually, what you have is a series of little buttons which you press and make it hop and go into a cup. It's a world championship. Now, you be careful. Now, you know what a conker championship is?
No.
Horse chestnuts they fall from the tree. They're lovely, brown, solid fruit. And you bore a hole through and you put a string through and tie a knot so that you dangle it. And then you hit at one another's conker to see if you can split it. There's a world championship conker. Now, just a few years ago, everybody got, oh gosh, it may catch kids in the eye. That was when we first started putting kids in cotton wool. And that's what's turned them onto computer games, for God's sake, is they don't play anything sensible. You don't know what conkers are, and you don't know what tiddlywinks are. Tut, 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 tut. I can't make you manager either if you don't understand the game.
I've never heard of tiddlywinks.
The only thing is that all the people who will try to force him, Southgate, out of office, none of them understand the game. They watch it, you see. It's the same as television. We listen day in, day out to people who know how to do television. Wonderful, wonderful stuff. And what is their qualification? They watch it. It's the same with football. What's their qualification for saying who should be manager and who shouldn't? They watch it. Big deal. Big deal. If that's the case, I can throw my hand in my cap my hat in the ring for being the manager of England. I watched it.
Well,
I know what to do.
You made a good point the other day about football. It's very boring and predictable. They all move in the same way. It's all very organized. You can predict what the next move's going to be, and it's quite boring.
Yes, it is.
And in your words, it's not what it used to be.
No, oh, indeed, it's not. The Matthews final of 53. Huh. Sublime. Absolutely sublime.
The Matthews final.
Well, a lot of these people who want this man out wouldn't know who Stanley Matthews was.
I don't know who Stanley Matthews is.
Yeah, well, look him up. Probably the icon of the game. And actually, when we played our the Jubilee years of the Queen, that item, there's a picture of the England team walking out at Wembley along with the Scottish team, which for a long time was a key fixture. And then somebody decided they shouldn't do it. But do you know who the man was who's leading in the England team now?
Was it the guy you just mentioned?
No.
Oh, who?
It's a guy called Billy Wright. And Billy Wright was once again an exceptional footballer. The funny thing is that Billy Wright ended up in television. He became the sports director of what was the old ATV studios or ATV television in the Midlands.
You know who was excellent in football and then became a TV presenter?
Who's that?
David Icke.
Was David Icke a good footballer?
He was a goalkeeper.
Was he? And who did he goalkeep for?
I can't remember, but he had to retire because he got arthritis at a very young age.
Oh gosh, yeah,
I think he got it in his early 20s.
it's a difficulty. Yeah. Anyway, the back page is all about Southgate. My job's in jeopardy. Come on, get real. Why don't we all get real as a nation instead of this me? Okay, I'm offended if they... The bloody team isn't good enough. We are not turning out the good enough players. And why? Because I can look at my team and there isn't one English bloody name amongst them. Now, at one time, teams were supported because they represented the area. That's how they started. They represented the area that they were in. So my team, Aston Villa, had a lot of players from Birmingham, Aston, and around about in the Midlands. Nowadays, I still watch them. Well, I don't watch them that often, but I mean, I still support them. I still, because everybody does. It's tribal. But I must say that I can barely recognize the name of anybody in there, and that is that's why. Because what we do is the football league is pretty strong in this country. That I accept. The trouble is that it turns out players which we then send off to Brazil and somewhere or other to play for the opposition. Right, where are we now? What are we doing now?
What are we doing now? Did you have another story from behind the headlines? Or was...
I didn't, but I'm quite sure that we can find
what we'll
one.
do is we'll go to the Potter's Wheel.
Now, you said, is there anything on the inside pages which has caught my eye? And Dominic Lawson's column, he says, the Echo Zealot's idea that Charles should challenge Truss would destroy everything his mother stood for. Now, I wondered who he's talking about, and he's talking about Andrew Marr, a man for whom I've had considerable admiration, and as both as an author and a news presenter, or at least
he's still doing the radio for LBC.
Is he still doing a radio show? Well, on television, his Sunday program, which I think has been taken over by Miss Rosencrantz or whatever her name is, it was I thought quite good, and that he managed to get some interesting people and some decent guests and made some decent points. But now apparently he has said that he's launched a campaign to encourage our new king to become the focal point of opposition to the policies of our equally new prime minister. Not as everything that the mother stood for, but also everything that our country stands for. We are a constitutional monarchy, where the monarch is the head of state and independent of politics. What on earth is Marr thinking about? And if there are people that support him, what are they thinking about? I mean, this is a sort of nonsense thinking that is cropping up out of our society. And it's basically because we don't have people who think it through. And also, we don't have people who respect what has happened in the past. They cannot put things in perspective. Bright new idea, we must have it now. We must have it now. Goodness gracious me, when are we going to grow up as a nation? Because believe me, we are facing that the world and our environment and nature does not respect our way of slotting things into time. It does things when it likes and how it likes. And we have to react to that, not steer it. We have to react. And we are not reacting at the moment to half the things that nature and the economics and other forces beyond the basic ken of us as pure mortals are throwing in front of us. We are not. We're coming up with mad ideas like this, trying to reinvent the wheel. It's in Andrew Marr's book that I learned that the first journalists were the pamphleteers of Charles I's time, who used to hammer anti-monarchy statements up on the wall and then run like hell, because if they were caught by the king's men, they would be summarily hauled off and have their heads cut off. So the early journalists were very, very brave people. That's what he's suggesting now. Dear, 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 dear. Dear, dear,
Journalists
dear, dear.
today are certainly not brave.
Well, it depends who you're talking about. I mean, I think that there are some left, but it was put to me by somebody who's a fairly careful thinker that the reason in the 1930s were particularly the golden age of journalism in this century, anyway, is that we got a lot of good thinking, almost intellectual people in charge of newspapers, because there wasn't any really radio. Well, there's a bit of radio, but not much television, and no television at all, actually, until 1936, I think. And so we got a very high level of intellect, if you like, who actually drank like fishes and swanned through lives, but they had great minds. And then it was suggested that actually what happened was that the media fell behind in pay. So people of like minds, the intellectuals, moved on to something else. Can't remember what the something else was, but and so media was left to without any great minds in it. And I could almost believe that. I really could.
What did happen to media? Because when you look through the newspapers, majority of them are opinion pieces, not fact-based. It's just, I think this, and I'm guilty of it too. I always give my opinion, but that's what you're here for.
Yes, I mean, actually,
that-
Andrew Marr does point out in his book, The History of Journalism, The History of English Journalism, I think it's called. He does point out that we have never had an impartial press. What we've had is a range of papers, from the Mirror, which is fairly left-wing, to the Telegraph, which is fairly right-wing, the Times, which is an establishment, and the latter days of the Sun, which grew out of another newspaper, which tends to be popular. So what we've got is we've got a lot of different opinions. So therefore, journalists aren't necessarily just straight down the middle. And I would agree with that. So why should we strive to be? I'm not. If I see an accident in the street, I want to make sure that I get the right number of people, and how many are killed, and so on and so forth. But if I then am going to go follow that up with my opinion on traffic laws, is I should have every right to be able to do that. Yeah. So it's a question of how you see journalism.
But I feel a lot of the articles aren't labeled opinion pieces.
No, they're not.
Which is, and people take these opinions as facts a lot of time, which is not great.
It would be great if you could have a totally impartial journalist,
but it will never happen.
No, it won't, because basically we're all born with some background and gives us ideas about what things should be.
Yeah.
But I mean,
if I grew up in a big city like London, I would be a completely different person.
That's right.
I would be, let's only think about me, the cities, the city life, and the city
That's right.
people.
But if you were on this program based in London, you would actually reflect that in the things that you said. What you do is you actually reflect the background of your life,
right?
And which is fair enough. Those are the things which have formed your view on things.
Yeah, that's what I do now.
Yeah.
I mean, most of my views are from a small conservative village of only 3,000 people. When was a bit random, but you said Lewis was 3,000 people, but 63 pubs or whatever.
No, it was 9,000. 9,000 people and 63 pubs.
What year was that?
1853 or thereabouts.
1853,
Yeah.
and the population was 9,000.
Yes.
And my village is 3,000 at this time.
Yeah.
So it's a small village.
Yeah, mind you, you know, there was a lot of changes in the 1800s. For instance, one of the small villages, I've got a feeling that it was not Rodmell, but this one southeast landed more shrimp out of the River Ouse than the fishing boats did in Brighton. I mean, that was the difference in populations and so on. I mean, that's hard to believe now, but apparently it was factually correct. So things change very, very rapidly. One thing I do like about going down the right bank of the River Ouse is that there are 3 or 4 delightful villages that in many ways have not changed much. Some of them haven't got a pub. They've all got a church, which it was there before the Normans got there. They don't expand much. There isn't much new building, and they are interesting little places to live if you like that sort of thing.
Yeah, and that's what I like. There's not much to do in my village, to be honest. There's for 3,000 people, there's a co-op, there's 2 churches, 5 pubs.
5 pubs.
5 pubs, a gardening shop, a knitting shop, and 2 cafes.
I would recommend to anybody who is interested in village life as it was in the 1800s, late 1700s and early 1800s, is Thomas Turner, who was, I think he was somewhere around Heathfield. He used to come to Lewes regularly, and he describes how he would come into the White Hart and drink heavily with his friends, get on his horse and fall off the horse halfway home. But he was the self-imposed tax inspector, customs inspector, and described how the vicar was the centre of hedonistic parties in their village. They regularly got drunk and bet on the cricket match. I mean, the village life was quite exciting in those days. And that was when Lewes was 9,000 people. No, actually, it was a bit later than that, really. It was the late 1700s. But Thomas Turner, the Diaries of Thomas Turner, very interesting in what they have to say about life in villages here. And there is one instance where I think it was the military at the time, ran customs protection, and they turned up in his village, and they threatened to arrest the landlord, and came to him because he was sort of the local magistrate, and he said he had a great tug of conscience because he felt it was his duty to have them arrest this man, but that he'd actually bought some brandy off him that was smuggled. Believe me, in villages in those days, his life was quite interesting, to say the least. Right, where are we now?
It is 10:52.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Goodness gracious me!
We've been going for almost 2.5 hours already.
We have.
So
well, we have nobody coming in or coming on at 11 this morning, so we'll aim to end at 11, shall we?
Yeah. Well, I think we will play one more short clip.
Okay.
What do we have that's short? We don't have any.
Nothing terribly short.
No, it's all like 5-10 minutes long.
Yes.
Or
okay.
like 10 seconds.
Well, there's a ghost train there.
Oh, yeah,
Why not play the ghost train?
Play the ghost train.
Well, it's a nice one.
We'll play this.
Many people find commuting by train tiresome. But one of the pleasures of taking a train to London is that it passes through some of the most beautiful countryside in the UK. None more so than the view of the countryside as the line approaches Clayton Tunnel, just north of Brighton. The tunnel is the longest on the line, at 1.25 miles, running under the South Downs. It's unusual because the entrance is not the usual railway brick. It is instead designed to look like the gateway to a castle. On top is a cottage built for the railway's lightkeeper in 1849. The tunnel itself was opened in 1841 and the cottage added later. Idyllic. But after 1861 it became a nightmare, or at least for those who believe in ghostly goings-on. In August of that year, a night train left Brighton, travelling north to London. Partway through the tunnel, it stopped at what it thought was a danger signal from the lightman. The engine driver was correct. The railway official had indeed given a danger signal, but the train had rushed past him before pulling up. Thinking the train had cleared the tunnel, the unfortunate lightman gave the all clear to a following train. And it slammed into the back of the first train in the dark, killing 23 and injuring 176 more. It was the worst ever accident on the line. And people walking on the downs over the underground passage have reported hearing the screams of the passengers as the trains pile into each other. The line is now also a direct line from Lewes. I've travelled through that tunnel 1,000 times. I've never heard a scream other than the screech of the wheels and brakes. But I've never walked over the downs at that point either. And I turned down an invitation to stay in the cottage overnight. In fact, I get tense each time I go into the tunnel, knowing what had happened more than 165 years ago. But my fellow passengers carry on reading their newspapers, obviously oblivious to both the tragedy and the ghosts. I could sometimes scream at them. The ghosts of Clayton Tunnel. Eerie. Bloody eerie.
Right, that's taken us up to 11 o'clock. But just before we go, while we were watching that, Max was telling me about his old grandmama who has got an old steam engine. Tell us a little bit more about it, Max.
She has an old-fashioned steam engine. I have never seen it in person because she parks it for free in a museum, and she can take it out whenever she wants. It's in Shoreham. I'll go for a day out with her at some point and look at it and hopefully do a little show around the steam engine. It's about 160 years old.
Wow, wonderful.
It's
wonderful.
road legal, and you don't have to have a driver's license to drive it, which is terrifying because they're ginormous.
Yes, they are.
Things.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
I was just saying, if you make one mistake and hit someone, you're dead immediately.
Oh, dear me. Well, good for Granny. Good for Granny.
She still has it.
Very quickly, the news is that the pound sinks to a record low against the dollar, and the Chancellor and the Prime Minister are under attack for their mini budget policies. There is a panic amid rumours the Bank of England may have to intervene on the plunging pound, and one analyst thinks it could happen this week. The patrols have stepped up around the mosques in Manchester after city centre disturbances between Sikhs and Muslims. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Here's the final one. The cost of charging an electric car has surged by 42%, with prices nearing the same as petrol. So much for the environment. There.
And one thing people forget is, where does electricity come from?
Exactly.
Where does electricity come from?
Peat fires.
It comes from the it comes from the plug sockets. That's where electricity comes from.
This is Mirador Television, broadcasting from the White Hart Hotel in the centre of Lewes. A wonderful place to come first thing in the morning, and indeed a wonderful place to come to throughout the day. We're not here all day, but do come and join the staff here, the owners, us. They're always a nice medley of people. And this is where we manage to broadcast from each day, on a day that is going to see sunny spells, but not reach much more than 15 or 16 degrees, and with a moderate wind. So we are going to see a bit of rain from time to time, and when it was scattered showers this morning, boy, was it heavy. So let's grit our teeth, brave the weather, and come down to the White Hart and have a cup of coffee or even a glass of wine.
All right. Well, we will see you tomorrow at 8:30. It'll be you tomorrow, and then me and Stuart on Wednesday. So you'll see Keith tomorrow at 8:30. So join tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Max on Wednesday at 8:30 with Stuart Dolby.
Oh no, I won't be with Stuart Dolby this week. He's off somewhere.
He's away somewhere, is he?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, then probably you'll want me to lurk in the background. But on Thursday, there's you and Liza Page, another great combination. And on Friday, me and Melissa Conti from New York.
Do you have anyone joining you tomorrow?
I hope that, as usual, that we will have Jane Watkins from Hastings. And Jane has really got her finger on the pulse of what goes on in Hastings, and it's good for us to get out of Lewes and into the Hastings Old Town and see what happens. There's quite a lively community down there, and she brings us up to date each week with what's going on. And we would have had Suzanne Mouchot with us from New York this morning. Suzanne is a regular on a Monday, but she has gone to Italy. And since she was landing this morning, and undoubtedly fagged out with jet lag, having come from New York to Rome or whatever, or Milan, she said, could she beg off? But normally she's here. So we have some very lively debate throughout the week, as well as some interesting historical bits and pieces, and bits and pieces that nobody is expecting. like breaking an egg. All right, till tomorrow. Toodle pip.
See you tomorrow. Bye.